and a very warm welcome to everyone in the third iteration of the iced coffee session. My name is Eamon and I'm a Global Innovation Fellow at CCIT. And today evening, I'm humbled to be the MC for the session. Uh, the iced coffee session is about innovation, creativity, entrepreneurship, and that aims to delve into the lesser explored topics and aspects of life, examining them through the lens of innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship. The inception of this series dates back to the year of 2022 via creativist exploration of Turkey, followed by a subsequent iced coffee series delving into philosophy, Taoism, Sufism, Stoicism, Ikigai, creative stupidity with Dr. Hafiz Stefan, as we had the session in the start of the year, and a holistic sound healing with Mansoor. So today, to moderate the session into thoughtful perspective and beyond, we have Dr. Asad, the director of CCIT and a professor of emergency medicine. In the captivating symphony of the art and music in the era of public health innovation webinar, we proudly introduced a guest, Mr. Faizan Tirmizi, who is a seasoned teacher, trainer, and public health practitioner. Faizan brings a unique blend of expertise to our Iced Coffee Global Webinar Series version 2.0 with 7 enriching versing both rural and urban landscapes. Faizan's influence extends beyond conventional boundaries. His teaching canvas spans from the sciences to the rhythmic notes of the music theory. What sets him apart is his dynamic impact in rural terrains, where he pioneers projects at the crossroads of telemedicine, emergency response, and community-driven healthcare solutions. Faizan's kaleidoscope of interest includes music, sociology, and global politics that mirrors the very essence of a series, art and music in the era of public health and innovation, which becomes a canvas where Faizan's passion and expertise harmonize with the core principles of innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship. And as a co-founder of Saving Nine, Igniting Rural Emergency Response and Social Medicine Initiative, Bridging Healthcare Perceptions, Faizan embodies the spirit of innovative thinking and creative problem solving. Join us in this enlightening webinar as Faizan Tirmizi unravels his journey intertwining education, public health, and a global perspective. So over to Dr. Asad.
Thank you very much, Eamon, for getting us started and talking about the iced coffee webinar series, which we've been running for, I think, 2 years now. And thank you for introducing Faizan as well. So Faizan and I go back, I guess, maybe 2 years. I don't know. I don't remember exactly. Maybe I was talking Faizan on LinkedIn, or maybe he or perhaps Faizan was talking me on LinkedIn, and we connected and we figured that we had shared interests. So I'm an emergency medicine doc. Faizan has interest in emergency care and first responders. And he'll talk more about some of his public health initiatives that he has delved into: social enterprise, social innovation, social entrepreneurship. So from that perspective, I found Faizan's journey really intriguing because of the cross linkages between what I have delved into and what Faizan has done. But more interestingly, Faizan actually has delved into music. He's going to talk to us a bit more. I guess you'll delve into music as well, Faizan. But today's session is not just about music. It's not just about emergency responses or emergency care. It's not just about innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship. It's truly unique because we're trying to bridge or intertwine or explore the cross section or the cross I guess, I don't know, cross something where all of these things kind of merge or collide. And we're talking about art and music. We're talking about public health. We're talking about innovation. And we want to get into the ethics of art and music, innovation, and how that is informing or influencing innovation itself. So a lot of things potentially, I don't know how many of those things we'll be able to delve into, but let's get going. So Faizan, when we were having an earlier conversation, trying to understand how are you going to be, how will we be conversing in this webinar today? By the way, just keep one thing in mind, that we will have, hopefully we'll have a lot of students. We have few students, and we have other people, non-students over here as well in the D Lab at AKU. Some people are online as well. So just for you to know that the audience is a bunch of students and non-students could be faculty, staff, and so on and so forth. People who are interested in innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship. But I think they're here more so because of the topic, which is interactive and kind of like along that spectrum that I mentioned. You did mention when we were earlier conversing about this that you're an autodidact, and I think that you're a polymath in the works. Um, Based on your own experiences and your own journey, how do you think you're relevant to this particular webinar series and to today's topic? Prior to getting into all of that, maybe you should explain to the audience what is an autodidact and who's a polymath. Who is a polymath and who's an autodidact? Maybe there are some linkages there. And keep your answers short. Thanks.
Definitely. So thank you for inviting me, Dr. Asad. It's a pleasure to be here. And let's get right to the chase. I do not prescribe to these labels. Honestly, I think that, in fact, I would go on to say that it's oxymoronic in itself. Being an autodidact or being a polymath means you're not a specialist of a particular thing. So if you're a specialist, it somehow conveys that you're a specialist of multiple things. But I personally, one quote which really strikes me in response to the terms autodidact and polymath, which is essentially being proficient in multiple disciplines, or that's a polymath, and whereas an autodidact is someone who learns something for himself. So, so the quote is, "What labels me negates me." It's by Soren Kierkegaard, and I think that really resonates with me in terms of this, that we try to categorize and label someone based on them doing one thing or multiple things, and it in a way really puts them in a box. And so I guess my story is simply not being put in a box and trying to really explore different avenues. So essentially, I don't prescribe to these labels, and I think thank you for saying that. But honestly, I think I can't do justice to those labels. There have been polymaths and autodidacts who have changed the course of history in Western history, in Islamic history, and so I'm just a mere I'm just a mere researcher. I would say that.
So, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that it's interesting. I mean, but you're still kind of resisting a label, right? So yes, these might be labels, but you're an individual who's got self-driven, self-motivated, self-learner, right? So autodidact is like, okay, you're learning on your own. At times, I think we don't necessarily have to belong to a particular discipline to call ourselves a practitioner of that particular discipline, right? Because otherwise, then I think it'll take us lifetimes just to be an expert in each and everything. In the 21st century, with everything that's happening around us, and there's a lot of chaos and there's a lot of noise, entrepreneurs are essentially problem solvers and solution seekers. That's how I like defining entrepreneurship or entrepreneurs. We have students who are really interested in entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial ventures and initiatives. Do you think, based on your experiences to date, you would tell students to be more expert oriented in a certain field before they can consider themselves to be problem solvers and solution seekers for that particular field? Or is it okay to just delve into something if you're passionate about it and you want to solve that problem, and then you navigate? So and you can make your mistakes and learn from that. What do you say about that?
That's an excellent question, and I think in today's world, I think it's a safe route to be a specialist. In that sense, that once you carve your niche out, then you can explore other avenues. It gives you a sense of security. Whereas the other side of this, which you mentioned, is it's laden with a lot of risk, and you eventually really need to decide where you are coming from and what will work for you. But I do think that you at some point need to expand your horizon and move beyond your specialty and not be tied to a box in that sense, because it's really the way the 21st century has turned out to be, I really don't think that the specialization in a particular field will give you the whole solution to the problem. So I would say that half of the solution would be the specialization, while the other half would be exploring other avenues and knowing how to communicate across disciplines and being able to pull off essentially like a cross fertilization, in a sense in which you are approaching problems from various perspectives, which would involve critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity. So I really think that specialization in itself is very important. Obviously, if you're a particular doctor for a particular thing, obviously you won't ask another type of doctor to, for example, operate on a person, right? So it's not taking away from specialization, but it's also being able to accommodate the upcoming changes which our society around the globe is facing. So that would mean essentially realizing that complex problems require you to think from multiple perspectives and engage with people from multiple disciplines. And especially from what I have seen in my limited experiences, that specialization tends to keep you within a certain orthodoxy, keep you within a certain frame of mind, make you susceptible to groupthink. And that in itself, while it would increase your prestige or your career prospects, that doesn't always necessarily translate into actual problem solving. So that's my 2 cents on that.
That was more than 2 cents. Actually, it was very well said. So captured really well and described really well. Thank you for that. For people who are here, this or online, if you have any questions or comments, just feel free to interrupt and ask. You want to keep these sessions interactive. Okay, so Faizan, let's delve into music, right? Because we want to talk about music and how they interact or influence public health and innovation. So for music, we all are aware that music and art, they're emotive, they're expressive. I think I would like to think we live to create art and music and other such things. So with music being an intrinsic part of human existence, you've kind of described music, the life affirming and life negating aspects of art and music, specifically about music, because that's something that you've got into. So tell us a bit more about that dichotomy, if I may, between life affirming and life negating aspects of music. How do you see this, and why is that important to you?
So thank you. That's a great segue to this part of the discussion. I actually borrowed the term of life affirming from Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche, and I just realized the opposite of that would be life negating. And essentially, life affirming versus life negating is pro-life versus anti-life. Now, how that manifests in various disciplines and spheres and social domains is something that we can delve into more. But we have seen that for millennia, music has served as a universal language, bringing joy, healing, and unity to people across cultures. So we can analyze this from like a sociological perspective, psychological perspective, and economic perspective. All of these domains have something to say about how music can be used for good and bad at the same time. And it's a very parallel to how science is used. Science can also be used for good and bad, as we know historically speaking. So for me, anything which results in better quality of life, better health, all of these things would be a life affirming aspect of music. And anything that would be against that is life negating, essentially. And we see both of these examples across history and sociology in terms of how that manifests. So we can delve more into it after your thoughts on this.
No, that's a great way of putting it, right? So they're both positive and negative aspects. You mentioned science, and I'm completely in agreement with that. So biomedicine and healthcare, there are life affirming and life negating aspects, even of healthcare and biomedicine. So completely with it. And I'm kind of intrigued that um, looking at it through the lens of art and music as well. So the segue or the follow through on that is when we think about the commercial or consumer aspect. Let's stick to music for now, right? So now we see this trend for several years now, decades, if not decades, that there's certainly innovation happening in music with different genres and perhaps electronic music and now with AI and machine learning and all those algorithms, and we've got music that might be created and it is being created by probably not human beings but algorithms. And so that's another really interesting area to consider in terms of innovation of music, but from the commercial aspect or the consumeristic aspect of music. And as we see the innovation, if we think about, let's say, today's commercial entities, for example, Coke, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Coke, specifically Coke Studio, as a case in point, they are huge sponsors. Obviously, Coke Studio, I think, and a lot of people say that, it's not just me. It's been around for I don't know, 2 decades now, perhaps. When I was living in the US, that's when Coke Studio, I think, first started, 2000s, perhaps, and then. So the point I'm making about Coke Studio, not to kind of demonize a particular, a brand. But when some entity or brand is being utilized to promote art and music, so more humanities, I guess, kinds of fields, yet the product itself is also leading to issues, public health issues, obesity, diabetes, sugary drinks, obviously, are doing all of those things. What's your take on that? So I know it's kind of like innovative business strategy, perhaps. I could look at it as a positive from that perspective because it's a novel way of approaching business and sponsorship, and people or musicians who might not have been encouraged otherwise because of Coke Studio. Now those elements are, or those individuals are being encouraged, and traditional music is being encouraged. Again, there's a revamp or something along those lines, right? You're fusing music and traditional music, but utilizing novel paradigms. So that's a great positive from that perspective. But in tandem, you have all of this other public health related issue being created as well. So I'm confused. I don't know. I can look at the positives, I can look at the negatives, but I don't know whether it's, how should one approach this? Over to you.
That is the paradox that I think we need to discuss today. It is extremely significant that we understand again, you can see how Coke Studio both represents a life affirming and life negating aspect. And where do you draw the line, right? I mean, if you are to be extremist about it, you don't listen to Coke Studio, but then it's also promoting local culture, and essentially for us it's folk songs all around, and they become really they are globalized to the whole globe hears them. You get to represent your culture on that level. So what should we do as artists, for example, right? So before we move on to that, we really need to realize what the position of the artist is in today's society. Artists, especially like huge artists, have great sway over mass opinion, and their lifestyles are actually emulated by people who listen to them, right? And it's important to understand that this sort of it's a responsibility at the end of the day, right? No one is saying that survive this world without patronage, because art has always had patrons. I mean, if you had empires back then you built amazing buildings on the backs of slaves. There's always an oppressive element, have been an oppressive element in most great works of art and monuments, right? And So it's a very tough. Again, it's not meant to demonize the artist or the platform in itself, but I think it's really important to understand that the influence that these artists have, right? And it's not just Coke Studio. I mean, we also have this product called Velo, which is essentially a narcotic, which can be orally taken. And young artists are performing on those platforms. And every time you hear that song, before the song comes the logo of Velo. After it comes Velo. Same for Coke Studio. So we know very well how music has been used for advertising. I mean, who here doesn't know the telephone hotline 09007860? I mean, the first time I heard it, it got imprinted on my brain, right? And we need to understand that music is also a vehicle, right, for carrying these things. So from a public health standpoint, I mean, if you look at Pakistan, it's right up there in terms of uh, diabetes and people who are suffering from it. So it's one really needs to think about this thing that, okay, yes, artists are getting a chance. By the way, we also need to understand this corporatization doesn't necessarily yield huge profits for these artists, all the local folk artists, for example, right? It's the profits are eventually taken by these corporate entities and those at the top. And what seems as inclusivity and an exhibition of diversity can also go the other way. And it's really important for us to understand that historically we did not have these this equipment or for musical recording or platforms for such ubiquitous availability of these songs. So there was a certain element of like, if you had Beethoven's concert happening, you would go over there, listen to it once, and try to absorb as much of it. It was an experience. Today's profit-centric world, which has been created by these corporate entities and institutions, are suffering from an institutional inertia where they want inclusivity and diversity, but the capitalist models that they're working on, they are exploitative for not only artists but consumers as well. And so it needs to be, if we go back into history, we'll talk about this more, how this, like historically, music has been used for life negating aspects. I mean, I just want to share a quick example. For example, the Nazis used this for propaganda as well. They proclaimed their Aryan superiority through German classical music. I mean, this was the reason that there was a split between Wagner, who was a musician and composer at that time, and Nietzsche, who was a huge fan of Wagner. As soon as we saw, uh, as soon as Wagner, when Wagner started actually to advocate for the Nazis, that is where Nietzsche drew the line of with that. And just to talk about what happened, this music was used to the point where in the concentration camps you would blow this music up just to suppress the screams of those who were tormented over there. So then you have witchcraft, the Salem trials, for example. A lot of women were thought to be dabbling with music, and music was elevated to this magical status in which then they were burned at the stake. So there are numerous examples. We can talk about more of them. You had human sacrifices based around music. So it hasn't always served as a vehicle for all of the documentaries that you see around the life affirming aspects of music or how important it has been. So it's very important to be historically literate, right, and not suffer from this sort of a willful amnesia when it comes to understanding the negative aspects of music. We can talk about this more. I would love to hear your response.
That's great. You've brought up some really intriguing new points, right? So you're really delving into the history of music, perhaps, and philosophy, right? So, and it's interesting to me that when you talk about the history of music, you're able to delve into Nietzsche and Wagner and history, of course, the historical perspective outside of philosophers or philosophy as well. I just love it. There's this interplay and interactiveness of all of these domains. And so the question that I'd asked was, what does one do when you think about brands promoting innovation or traditional music, or using innovation in music as a case in point, and traditional music and newer musicians coming to the forefront because of these brands. At the same time, they're also creating or promoting public health issues because of diabetes and overweight and obesity and so on and so forth. So there is no easy answer to that, because it is much more complicated, right? It is a complex issue, problem, and so are human beings, and so is our history. And so I think it kind of points to a lot of that. For new people who've just joined online, or new audience over here, we have Faizan Tirmizi. He's joining us from Lahore. And Faizan's a very interesting individual. And those of you who missed the beginning, he's an autodidact and a polymath, and you can look it up what those words mean. So Faizan, oh, before that, if any people over here, if you have any questions or comments, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, please, let's interact. Yeah, sure. Okay, so did you hear that? Did you get the question? So
I can't hear,
question,
sorry.
Faizan. Oh, okay. So the question was, in one of our medical students aware in the course that they're taking on innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship, that if you could elaborate on the relationship between music and the rising trend in diabetes. Perhaps there's no direct link, but I think you know the background and what we've been talking about. Perhaps you could, at this point, you could perhaps explain or delve into the commodification of art and music, and how that is linked into worsening trends of public health related matters as well.
Great. So it's not just diabetes. I mean, to make a direct correlation, I don't have a graph to present to you in terms of there is a direct link between studio and diabetes. It's really got to do with the fact that anything that is commodified today is advertised in such a manner that it uses all of these advertising, like these marketers have neurochemically cracked your code on what gives you that sort of high and what would allow you to remember these things. I mean, here's the intensity that I want you to understand about this. Patients of dementia, actually, when they listen to music from their past, can actually immediately start remembering things. And you can look up various documentaries. There's this great documentary called Alive Inside. It's available on YouTube, and this just shows how people with dementia can actually be transformed from their vegetative states into actual interactive human beings once again when they listen to their music. And they just have to put like an iPod on their ears, and that just happens. So if music can serve as an emotional anchor, right, for dementia students, imagine what that would mean if you are constantly hearing Coke or any sort of other brand that has a jingle associated with it. I mean, the big bucks that these jingle makers make, right? And they are at the forefront of commodifying music in that sense. Again, the point is to not demonize someone or to somehow say that that's bad, but it's important to raise awareness on that front. So we have this intensity that music has with memory, and how this can actually act in terms of like uh, giving you that neurochemical addiction to that particular thing. So, but let's just move beyond diabetes and go towards like just harmful behaviors, such as which are endorsed in lyrics of many songs today. If you just look at the quality of songs from the 1950s to today, I mean, the graph which has gone down is that of modesty, right? You have such explicit lyrics, and you have such lyrics that advocate self-harm, that today's generation that is constantly hooked to the internet doesn't get any sort of reprieve from this onslaught, this commercial onslaught by these entities. And for me to like give you a list of, like, the list is on and on among. We need to understand that it's not just the life negating aspect. This can be transformed in a positive sense as well. But just to give you, this is a brief idea of how essentially music can really capture your subconscious, right, and give you thoughts which you wouldn't normally occur to you. It amplifies your emotions. If it amplifies emotions of happiness, it can also do that for anger. And even, for example, suicide. I mean, there's particular song in Japan which has the highest rate of suicide, and there's a whole like study around how that song actually has been contributing to this sort of mental health dilemma. So, just to think that this is just a diabetes issue, it's not just that, it is prevalent at multiple levels, and it is really embedded and seeped into our subconscious and how we're supposed to act. So, apart from that, I mean, we can move beyond towards other life negating aspects of music as well. What I want to emphasize again is that this talk isn't just about life negating aspects of music, but it's also about the positive aspects of music as well. So I hope that gives you some sense of what I'm trying to say. We can get into more examples as well on how this could potentially be a public health concern. And it's not just a public health concern, it can be an environmental concern as well. The musical concerts that you have today, I mean, the electronic music dance festivals, you look at the environmental footprint, the carbon footprint that results from this, it's staggering. And so there's there's a shadow which we are not able to see behind this, the flashiness of music. We also need to understand how visual music has become as well. I mean, every song needs a music video. There has been a rapid transformation due to technology and its effects on music and society as a whole. So we can delve more into this as the continues.
Yeah, thank you, Faizan. I think that was really well said. So does it kind of address your question? So I guess just to kind of recap, so I don't think Faizan is saying that there's a direct link that music is going to directly be causative for diabetes or increasing the prevalence of diabetes. I think these are indirect linkages, but enough evidence has been created now that it is more than just obviously diabetes. We're also thinking about mental health issues and how that also is playing a role based on the music that you're listening, the lyrics, or the kind of music. So life affirming versus life negating aspects of music. So I guess other questions, comments, anybody for now? Online, yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Okay. That's a great question. And Faizan obviously hasn't heard, I think, anything that you've said. So one of the students over here is questioning. So this is turning into a debate, Faizan, which is great actually. That's our intention. That we don't want to like just dole out things and say this is the end all be all. It's certainly not the point. It's meant to generate thoughts and it's meant to generate counter arguments and counter arguments, and that's great, right? So ICE, innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship is the playing ground, but we're using case studies in music and art, all right, and trying to link them to public health. Maybe there is no overt linkage, but that's fine. That's okay. Even if they're covert linkages, that is creativity. So you start connecting the dots. And then, so yeah, I guess I'm not supposed to answer the question, but so the question for Faizan is, do you think it's, this might be a bit of a stretch, is what the point that's been raised is, that how can we say, what is the evidence to really tell us or point us in that direction that listening to a certain kind of music genre, or if it's violent music, let's say, or the lyrics are really violent, or if you're looking at art, and it's I don't know, destructive art. I'm not sure if that's the right way of describing it, but what evidence is there that it can generate certain kind of behavior or attitude which is then destructive or self-destructive for the individual, and then spreads out into the community and so on?
Excellent question. I think that this is well documented and you can research on this as well if you want. But let's just make a parallel between uh, having to play like violent video games, for example. Would you allow your child to play GTA 4, GTA 5 with all of its explicit content without any supervision? Do you think that there are studies conducted on video games which promote these sort of things? Uh, they're anecdotes, right? And people hear all of these things, and it is part of our culture, and we need to see what that's turning out to be. So I don't have a list of like research studies to tell you that. I do have like historical and sociological perspectives around this, which would say that yes, if you keep listening to, I mean, let's also just base this on our experience, right? I mean, if I play the national anthem right now, how many of you would stand up? I think a lot of people, you've been trained throughout your life to do that. Why are you, uh, have you ever questioned why you would do that? I mean, we're also Muslims, so I don't see people standing 5 times in the day and praying as when they hear the azan, as much as when they see, like, when they hear the national anthem playing and then rising up. So the effects of music in that sense are quite unseen in that sense, right? And to establish direct linkages in order to do something about it, I think before that we need to have enough anecdotes and conversations around this to make this a research priority and to really delve into what could empirically justify these sort of perspectives based on this. But regarding just basically whether it's a stretch to say that it's going to cause this and that, definitely. I mean, nobody's claiming over here that if listening to Coke Studio gives you diabetes. However, what we are claiming is that advertisers have cracked your code in terms of understanding how music can manipulate your brain, and they are using it. There are also life affirming aspects to music as well, music therapy. I can talk about African drum circles, Sufi whirling dervishes, Bhakti movement in India. All of these things historically have shown how music has actually enhanced life information in that sense. So if you want to get me, like, we can discuss specifics if you have a research study right now which shows the opposite. But right now we're just trying to make a claim that as much as we think there are positive aspects to music, we rarely reflect upon what the negativity surrounding it would be as well. And the video game example is important for us to understand in that sense, like what you're being exposed to, right? It's very important to understand that these things are deeply embedded and are not explicit in a lot of ways, right? But they're over there and they're constantly sanctioned in that sense, and permitted without proper scrutiny of that situation. I mean, for example, we have explicit ratings on songs as well, and games as well. But do you think that's enough? Do you think that has stopped people from listening to that sort of music or playing those sort of games? Should they stop listening to that music because it could be potentially harmful? These are all questions I think we should really get to the bottom of and try to think of the ways our society is actually changing at such a rapid rate.
Thank you. Does it kind of answer, or you have? Okay, so the link to video games is has been thoroughly been disproven. By the way, I don't know because I have not read the literature on this, but so it is not to convince one camp or the other. We're not. Sorry, we're not. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
So the point is not to kind of have camps, to opposing camps over here or viewpoints. Let's keep it at that. That okay. So there are things that we are probing and what is the level, what is the evidence, and what is the level of that evidence. Okay, so as you med students, as you go along your 5-year program, then you will start realizing that it's not as straightforward as kind of debunking something as well. So it's not just what evidence is there, what is the level of that evidence as well. So it might not be as straightforward as accepting a body of literature or rejecting another body of literature. I'm talking about biomedical papers and research and so on and so forth. So any other question or comment? Yeah, go ahead. Okay, that's a, yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. So if I understand the question, so Faizan, the question is, what are your thoughts, or what, maybe you've read about this as well? What's the literature suggesting about integrating creativity or music and art, let's say, into curricula, and uh, what's the neuroscientific basis for that, and is that linked to better outcomes in terms of educational prowess, perhaps? And I'm assuming you mean for higher education students who are in colleges and universities, or younger folks. Okay, okay. So the link to public health then. So it doesn't have to be a college student, but it could be younger students even. But if you have music being incorporated, let's say music and art programs being incorporated, so is there evidence, or is there a link to better public health later on? Is that okay? All right.
Better public health. I would. I mean, if there's an exclusive program dedicated to that, that could be a possibility. I mean, we have had music therapy circles, and based around that, how we could essentially create community groups for have social cohesion and encourage it among groups, right? And we have historical evidence across it. We've had Sufi music, we've had African drum circles, and all of those things. In terms of it's really important to understand what you consider to be a public health concern as well at this particular point, right? There are potential concerns which could arise, and there are public health concerns which we currently are experiencing. So, for example, if I have to say that somehow musical training will stop the next coronavirus pandemic, I don't think that anyone is claiming that, right? But in terms of just talking about integrating music into curricula, that has been happening since the time of the Romans and the Greeks, right? And also just to talk about what, in terms of not as much as public health, I haven't come across much studies which talk about this more, but more along the lines of intelligence and how it does music amplify intelligence when you integrate into curricula. So, for example, you heard the Mozart effect, right? Or this recent emergence of binaural beats as somehow enhancing your intelligence. What I have understood is that there is no direct link with listening to certain types of music and then somehow getting like an enhancement. I mean, they're not steroids. It's not magic. It's music, right? It's important to understand to remove that superstition out of that. So it's more got to do with you being involved in musical training, learning an instrument, learning different creative ways of doing that, which is actually shown like the more fingers you use, there's currently a study which talks about the more hands-on experiences you have, the more white, I can't recall properly whether it's white matter or gray matter, but that there is a significant increase in that. And just going back to another point, I mean, I think that we can rely on scientific truth, right? To establish whether something is life affirming or life negating is also something we need to explore, because science has an orthodoxy. It is an institution. For every study where you see that there could be something positive, another study could be talking about something negative. And it is upon the experience and critical insight of the researcher that ultimately gives them that sort of reflection or that sort of awareness into when it comes to the topic. So if you have studies debunking video games or music in that sense, you also have studies doing the opposite, right? And really, what matters is that we bring these things into conversation and understand that. If music wasn't important in terms of advertisement, I'm going back to the previous point. I hope I've talked about the public health perspective and the musical curricula. Go back to the previous point that music is used for advertisement. Do we need a research study if we are seeing constantly every brand employing this? And I mean, there's also your life experience. We have this constant tendency to rely on case studies and scientific case studies, which are uh, conducted in very specific and controlled circumstances and like bias samples. I mean, there are a lot of issues within research as well. So it's important to understand the general impact from like what you see is happening, right? Do you see crime rate? Do you see violence increasing in your society? Is it because of a lack of music? Is it because of more music? Both can happen. And Khadija made this point in the chat, I think, where she said that correlation is not necessarily causation. I agree. But it's important to understand them and explore these correlations and see what it turns out to be. Um, there is also, like, there has, again, we can talk about the exploitative aspects of music. People take this personally as well, which is, again, I would like to say this is not meant to demonize or talk about, like to put down someone. But again, it's also important to realize these are sort of conversations should lead us towards a better understanding of public health in that particular sense. Because if you have, for example, Coke Studio advertising with music, do you have any other institution which is pro public health using music to do that? Right? I don't see that happening as much as hearing more about Coke. Do you hear more about? Everybody's heard about Coke Studio, but rarely would you hear about a musical therapy startup, which is actually improving lives in a very cost-effective manner, as opposed to the conditions that are set upon by big pharma. I mean, there's this whole documentary on YouTube which talks about how essentially big pharmaceuticals would rather not invest in iPods for these dementia patients, which allows them to regain some sort of humanity, right? And would rather keep them in vegetative states. Also, their society is geared towards old homes. There is a whole connection of these commercial interests which factor in to how your patient needs to be treated, right? So again, very important. Nobody's questioning scientific truth. What we are questioning is that are we critically engaging with all sides of these case studies and really coming up with a nuanced response to it? Are we having nuanced conversations around this? Because there is a definite evidence of music being used music being abused historically, from propaganda to a lot of other situations which you would ideally not wish to happen, but they do.
Thank you. It was, you kind of delve into a lot of different things over there, but I think you've kind of pointed out in the process that, and I mentioned this in the past as well in this session, that what we're dealing with, the topic, it's a complex topic. Okay, so there are various players over here and there are interactions. Okay, so there is no straightforward, okay, you've got to have case studies, or and I agree with you, Faizan, that it cannot be as simple and straightforward as evidence for or evidence against. It is much more complicated and complex than that. And that does tie into the iced coffee webinar series. It's meant to be topics that are lesser explored. We would never have thought about art and music and linking it to public health and innovation had it been our other parallel webinar series, which is the MedJack webinar series. That's a direct, explicit linkage to innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship. So there's this alternative way of kind of bringing something to the forefront and then having a conversation about it, and just generating interesting thoughts. Okay, maybe none of these thoughts are going to go any further for our medical students or other students or other folks who are listening in. For some, could be just one person, it might just connect and they might even end up putting together a research study around it. And it could be a humanities, social sciences, public health kind of an interactive or multidisciplinary kind of a research study. Who knows? We've kind of seen things kind of pan out, and we can't even predict them beforehand. So very grateful for this conversation and this session. I don't have my laptop in front of me, so I don't know if there's any comment or question online. If somebody, okay, fine. So, yeah, please go ahead. That's a really interesting question. So the question is, so in terms of art and music, I guess messages that are being conveyed through art and music, are there any laws, regulations that kind of uh, do these messages go through some kind of vetting process? Perhaps there's some laws in place so that what's the veracity of the messages, authenticity, and so on and so forth. Or if there is nothing, so then anybody can say anything through art and music, and then it becomes dogma, perhaps, and that's counterintuitive and it's destructive. Is that okay? Is that the question? Yeah. Hold on, I'll just hand over because it's just simpler. Yeah, that's fine.
Hi, thank you. So मैं एक message, एक video देख रही थी actually, India की वो video थी, and there was a song I think everyone has must करूँगा तेरे साथ दीवा, like उस पे उन्होंने ये बताया था कि because of these lyrics that have been used, जिनकी कोई proof reading या कोई regulation उसके ऊपर नहीं थी, उसकी वजह से कितना harassment leading to rape and everything, वो सारी चीजों के बारे में वहाँ पे बात हो रही थी. So somehow when I इसके
I'm sorry, I can't hear you in between. Sorry, I couldn't hear you in between. थोड़ी आवाज कट गई थी.
आवाज आ रही है अभी?
जी.
अभी आ रही है?
मुझे यहाँ से पता चल गया कि sir, Doctor sir, did you hear her point? Could you just recap it briefly, or does she wants to complete it?
एक मिनट अभी पूछ रहे हैं कंडेंस करके आप पूछने सब.
अच्छा, okay, so my question is कि पाकिस्तान के अंदर do we have any sort of regulatory laws जिसमें lyrics या any content that is going public, and any message, either it could be of any product promotion or anything that is going through the masses by using the medium of art or music. So are there like any sort of policies and protocols in place, because that is surely a very strong impact on.
I completely agree, and I haven't come across anything for music. You have that camera for movies, for example. आप देख सकती हैं हर मूवी तो बैन हो जाती है यहाँ पे, ठीक है. तो और आपको ये भी पता है कि हमारी एट द एंड ऑफ द डे हमारी बॉडी कौन सी है, हमारी एस्टैब्लिशमेंट है जो कि हमें बताती है कि हमें किस तरह के गाने सुनने चाहिए और कौन से नहीं सुनने चाहिए, कौन सी मूवीज देखनी नहीं. दिस इज अ जनरल प्रेडिक्मेंट फॉर डेवलपिंग नेशंस जो आजकल हम देखते हैं, वेदर इट्स इंडिया पाकिस्तान के, ये इस तरह है. वरना इफ यू गो अब्रॉड, वहाँ पे आपके पास इतना ही है कि एक्सप्लिसिट कंटेंट वगैरह है, बट विद द अवेलेबिलिटी ऑफ म्यूजिक ऑन मल्टीपल प्लेटफॉर्म्स कहीं ना कहीं से एक्सेसिबल हो जाते हैं. टेक्नोलॉजी ने ये चीज कर दी. तो वेदर यू, वही वाली बात है कि अगर हम लोग इस पॉइंट पे पहुंच गए हैं कि हम लोग ये कहना शुरू हो गए कि हम लोग ड्रग्स को लीगलाइज करते हैं क्योंकि उनकी अवेलेबिलिटी अब मार्केट में ऐसी हो गई है कि एटलीस्ट हम लीगलाइज, लाइक वी आर एट द सेम पॉइंट इन सम सेंस म्यूजिक के साथ भी किया. वो ठीक है, हमने रेगुलेशंस बना दी उसके अराउंड और सब कुछ कर दिया, बट दैट डजंट मीन कि वो इन अवेलेबल नहीं है और पेरेंटल सुपरविजन का ऐसा कोई इसमें चक्कर नहीं नजर आता. तो आई अगेन वही बात है कि जैसा एक समवन एल्स पॉइंटेड आउट कि कोई, अब देखें, अब आपने ये बात सुनी है, अब आपको साइंटिफिक स्टडी चाहिए इसके लिए. यू नीड अ साइंटिफिक स्टडी टू अंडरस्टैंड कि अच्छा, मुझे नहीं लगता कि ये पॉसिबल हो सकता है क्योंकि साइंस ने प्रूव कर दिया है कि इससे नहीं फर्क पड़ता. I mean, there are a lot of people out there who would just then negate that, कह देंगे कि ठीक है यार, मतलब साइंस ने हमें कहा है ये लोगों के ऊपर अपना है कि ये किस तरीके से एक्ट करते हैं. That's true in itself as well. You could be hearing abusive language all the time, but you could be the nicest person. It's a personal choice. The point is, how much of our society is advocating that, और कितनी दफा आपको सुनना पड़ता है. प्रोपोगेंडा का नंबर 1 क्राइटेरिया ये है, रेपिटेशन रेपिटेशन रेपिटेशन. ठीक है, आप एक चीज बार बार सुनेंगे, आपको वो आपके वो अंदर आ जाएगी. एंड दैट इज एग्जैक्टली हाउ नेशनल प्रोपेगेंडा वर्क्स एज वेल. आपको अगर आज इंडिया पसंद नहीं है तो उसके पीछे मलिका तरन्नुम ने बहुत सारे गाने निकाले हुए हैं जो कि पाकिस्तान को एडवोकेट करते हैं, ठीक है, और नेशनलिज्म को करते हैं. सो इट्स इम्पोर्टेंट टू अंडरस्टैंड, ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट बात है कि देखें केस स्टडीज और ये चीजें आप एज योर, अब जाहिर सी बात, योर पार्ट ऑफ दैट प्रोफेशन, यू नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड कि ये चीज क्रेडिबिलिटी है. बट प्लीज डू नॉट ओमिट लाइफ एक्सपीरियंस एंड योर एक्चुअल real life sociological insights और अपनी common sense को please ना छोड़िएगा, because don't be stuck in silos like this कि मतलब यही हमारा वर्ल्ड व्यू हो रहा है just because you want validation from your peers कि यार ये साइंस का प्रोटोकॉल है, ये अभी तक कोई नहीं है तो ये हुआ नहीं होगा. Really it's important to understand as advocates of health today कि what should be your moral standpoint, because every artist तो एक moral ambiguity में फंसा हुआ है कि ठीक है हमने पैसे कमाने, पेटने चाहिए तो हम ये काम इसको कर सकते हैं, हम लोग ये चीजें आराम से एडवोकेट कर सकते हैं. The point is simply कि how today's world has given you enough tools and access कि आप एक खुद एक्सपेरिमेंट करके, it has been democratized, music has been democratized. आपका स्टूडियो जो है एक कंप्यूटर के अंदर आ गया है, people are doing it, right? आपके पास, आपको मीडिया चैनल की जरूरत नहीं है जब यूट्यूब पे आप पॉडकास्ट इतने सारे सुन रहे हैं, आपकी ये चीजें पर्सनलाइज हो गई. सो इट रियली नीड्स टू बी क्वेश्चन टुडे कि इसके कोई अगर नेगेटिव रिपरकशंस हैं वो क्या है, और उसको हम लोग किस तरीके से एड्रेस कर सकते हैं, क्योंकि हमारे पास रेगुलेशंस तो ये एक ऐसी चीज है जिसके ऊपर हमें नहीं लगता कि काम कर पा रही है. तो this is the paradox which we seem to be living in. I hope I've adequately responded to your point. It was a really important point.
Thank you for that point. It was a very good question. Yeah, we can take one last, because we are, what's the time? Yeah, it's almost 6 p.m. So one last question, and then Faizan, if you could just wrap up the session, give us some take-home message, right? But we'll have why don't you come out here, ask the question, because rather than me being the intermediary, I'll just hand over the mic.
Thank you for helping out though.
Okay, so this is kind of like a double, like two questions in one, really. My first question is to you, like, if we are looking at science as fundamentally as an exploration of truth and truth seeking, and we're looking at the humanities as an exploration of experience, right? And not like, I hope that makes sense. How do you bridge that gap in your work? So that's the first layer of the question also, because you want to lead with evidence, but you also want to lead with like anecdotal evidence and exploration of the human experience, right? But secondly, healthcare professionals, how do we apply, for example, to evidence-based practice as well?
That's a great question. That balance जो हमें करना है. Nobody is saying कि आप अब scientific studies छोड़ दें, ठीक है, ये बिल्कुल बात नहीं है. But we need to understand the sociology of disciplines as well. आपको ये पता होना चाहिए कि highest level पे physics है, और एक चीज को हम physics envy भी कहते हैं, जो कि फिर हम लोग अपनी soft sciences और humanities में उसको emulate करने की कोशिश करते हैं, because उससे फिर हम लोग, हमारी quantifiability justify होगी और हमें भी funding मिलेगी उस तरह की research करने की. ठीक है, दिस इज सो प्रेवलेंट कि अगर आप सोचो यूनिवर्सिटीज में, अगर आप ए लेवल्स में भी देखें तो जो हाईएस्ट पेइंग टीचर्स हैं वो आपके हार्ड साइंसेज के हैं, और सबसे लोएस्ट पेड जो हैं वो आपके सोशल साइंसेज के. ठीक है, एंड टू थिंक उसकी वजह से कि साइंटिफिक ट्रूथ जो आपको बताया जा रहा है, ठीक है, उस लेवल पे, या फिर डार्विनियन एवोल्यूशन, ऑल ऑफ दीज थ्योरीज आर बीइंग चैलेंज्ड by people within those communities, but they are sidelined like any other orthodoxy. आप सबसे पहले ये देखिए, साइंस एक ह्यूमन एंडेवर है, ठीक है, इट इज समथिंग दैट ह्यूमंस आर एंगेज्ड इन. सो हम लोग रिलीजन को भी कह सकते हैं इट्स अराउंड ट्रूथ सीकिंग, एग्जिस्टेंशियल ट्रूथ्स को हमने करना. हम आर्ट को भी कह सकते हैं इट्स अराउंड इमोशनल ट्रूथ्स. बात ये है कि साइंस के पास जागीरदारी, क्योंकि इतनी चीजें आ गई हैं, आप अल्टीमेटली उस पर रिलाई करते हैं. खैर, ये कह दिया, लेकिन इसका मतलब ये नहीं है साइंस ने हमें चीजें नहीं दी हैं. साइंस ने हमें बहुत सारे फायदे, साइंस ने हमें वो सारी चीजें दी हैं जो कि मैं आप आज से जो आपसे बात कर रहा हूँ वो साइंस की वजह से है, राइट? सो इट्स अ वेरी ट्रिकी सिचुएशन वेयर यू नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड दैट yes it is truth seeking, but then you need to understand as well कि truth क्या आप सिर्फ एक रेफरेंस से देख सकते हैं? अगर हम लोग आज म्यूजिक के फायदे देख रहे हैं, फॉर एग्जांपल ये तो है ना कि म्यूजिक थेरेपी में और ये सब म्यूजिक यूज हो रहा है और अब आपके अराउंड केस स्टडीज भी निकल रही हैं इसकी, बट सोसाइटीज को पहले कैसे पता था कि हमने म्यूजिक यूज करना है जिससे हम अपनी ट्रेडिशंस पास ऑन करेंगे, ये सब चीजें करेंगे? हमारे पास क्या सिर्फ मेडिकल साइंस की हीलिंग थी या हमारे पास लोकल हीलिंग के लिए भी, इंडिजिनस हीलिंग के लिए भी प्रैक्टिसेस थे? और क्या आपको लगता है कि वेस्टर्न मेडिसिन या फिर एक जनरल यूरोसेंट्रिक मॉडल हमारी दुनिया पे ये छा गया है जिसपे हम लोगों ने वही कल्चर लेके दूसरी जगह आना है? दिस इज इम्पोर्टेंट टू अंडरस्टैंड बिकॉज दिस इज वेयर हिस्ट्री कम्स इनटू प्ले। अगर आप अपनी साइंस की एडवांसमेंट देखें, जितनी भी साइंस की एडवांसमेंट हुई है ज्यादातर आपको वॉरफेयर में नजर आएगी। मिलिट्री टाइम सबसे ज्यादा, मिलिटरिस्टिक टाइम सबसे ज्यादा, जब भी आपकी मिलिट्री एक्टिव होती है आपको टेक्नोलॉजी के एडवांसमेंट्स मिलते हैं, ठीक है? आप साइंस देखेंगे जस्टिफाई, आप की बात कर रहे थे कोई यहाँ पे आप ही करेंगे सॉरी जो आप आई थी लास्ट में, ये चीज उतने ही झूठ के लिए भी यूज होती है। गूगल सोशल डार्विनिज्म, गूगल ऑल ऑफ दोस थिंग्स जिधर हमें रेसिज्म को जस्टिफाई किया गया, नाजीज ने जिस तरीके से जस्टिफाई किया, लाइक साइंस एक नैरेटिव एट द एंड ऑफ द डे बन सकता है। यस इट इज मेंट टू परस्यू सीक एम्पिरिकल ट्रूथ, यस, बट when it's being handled by humans it can be used for that, ठीक है? आपके पास साइंटिफिक डिस्कवरीज में भी अगर आप आजकल खोल के देखें, नेचर के आर्टिकल्स देखें, सब देखें, आपको हर नजर आ रहा होता है कि जी लोगों ने फॉल्स क्लेम्स किए। द डिफरेंस इज द साइंटिफिक इंस्टीट्यूशन हैज मैकेनिज्म्स इन प्लेस टू होल्ड पीपल अकाउंटेबल, ठीक है? क्योंकि ये इतना इंपॉर्टेंट है इस चीज के लिए, रिट्रैक्ट हो जाते हैं पेपर्स वगैरह। अगर आप सुना स्टैनफोर्ड के प्रेसिडेंट के साथ क्या हुआ था, तो आई जस्ट वांट यू टू अंडरस्टैंड दैट प्लीज डू नॉट ट्रीट साइंस एज द न्यू प्रीस्टहुड। इट इज नॉट द न्यू, आपने पहले पुराने रिलीजियस लोगों को समझा हुआ था कि उन्होंने आपको ट्रूथ देना है, अब आपने सोचा है कि साइंस है जो कि आपको ट्रूथ देगी, हालांकि ट्रूथ इज ब्रोकन इनटू मल्टीपल फ्रैगमेंट्स। आपका अपना ट्रूथ जब आप ये सब चीजें मिला के करते हैं तब ही हो सकता है। ये भी याद रखिए साइंस में कोई चीज इटर्नल नहीं है। आज एक चीज साइंस कह रही है कल वो चेंज हो जाएगी, तो आपका हर दिन सच बदल रहा है तो आपको लगता है कि ये सच है कि एक नया आया जी, न्यूटोनियन फिजिक्स आई थी, न्यूटोनियन फिजिक्स को ब्रेक करने के लिए क्वांटम रेवोल्यूशन आया, तो फिर क्या न्यूटोनियन फिजिक्स का हमने कंप्लीटली ऑब्सोलीट कर दिया? नहीं, हमने बताया कि उसकी एक जगह एक स्पेसिफिक लिमिटेशन है, यहाँ पे हम लोग क्वांटम फिजिक्स लगाएंगे। सो अलाउ साइंस टू ब्रीथ एज वेल। मतलब साइंस को आप खुद उसका साइंस का काम नहीं करने दे रहे अगर आज आपने उसे इटर्नल ट्रूथ समझ लिए, ठीक है ना? क्योंकि वो उसके नेचर में है कि वो चेंज हो सकता है आगे जाके। सो अगेन डोंट एलिवेट साइंटिस्ट टू द new priesthood. Again, the whole point of science is to make you constantly explore, engage, and do all of these things. So I hope nobody has got this sort of impression that science को आपने it's lesser than art या religion, सब कुछ हर चीज की एक प्लेस है। प्लीज आप जरूर, यही मैं कह सकता हूँ, मैं एक स्पेशलिस्ट नहीं हूँ लेकिन मैं इसी वजह से मुझे पता है कि साइंस की लिमिटेशन मुझे कहाँ तक नजर आ रही होती है, ठीक है? आप भी अपनी एक्सप्लोर करें, देखिए इससे क्या है, आप हर थिंकिंग की एक लिमिटेशन आ जाती है, उधर से दूसरी थिंकिंग शुरू होती है। सो माय मैसेज वुड बी एट द एंड ऑफ द डे, व्हाट सॉर्ट ऑफ क्रिएटिविटी एंड इनोवेशन व्हाटएवर यू आर सीकिंग, please don't go towards a one size fits all or a monolith perspective, ठीक है ना? engage with people, communicate with them, really realize कि हमारे problems क्या हैं। We are constantly pursuing technocentric models to solve our problems. Einstein ने कहा था you cannot solve a problem which has risen from the same set of consciousness। यानी कि सिंपल सी बात है कि अगर टेक्नोलॉजी हमें फायदे दे रही है नुकसान भी दे रही है। अगर आप टेक्नोलॉजी के प्रॉब्लम्स को करने के लिए आप और टेक्नोलॉजी बना रहे हैं, आपकी अप्रोच थोड़ी गलत है इस चीज में। फिर आपको सोचना चाहिए कि अगर मेरा प्रॉब्लम ही ये टेक्नोलॉजी से निकला है, परहैप्स मुझे फिर पब्लिक डोमेन की तरफ आना है कि इसको किस तरीके से करना है, और वाइस वर्सा। अगर पब्लिक मसले आ रहे हैं हमने शायद अभी तक टेक्नोलॉजी से नहीं किए होंगे। सो रियलाइज दैट relying on one single narrative can, again that means you're a specialist, right? आप एक narrative को represent कर रहे होते हैं, that is where specialists become susceptible to this sort of group thing, जिससे आपकी advancement of progress actually रुक सकता है। engage with multiple disciplines, public health के हवाले से बहुत जरूरी है हमारे पास कि जितना हम लोग मेडिकल और ये चीजें पढ़े उतना ही हम बाहर निकलें, लोगों से बात करें, देखें कि उन्होंने किस तरीके से प्रॉब्लम्स की हैं और उनके साथ आप क्या कोऑपरेट कर सकते हैं, रादर देन tell them कि हम लोग बाहर से ये टेक्नोलॉजी लाएंगे, ये लगाएंगे और ये चल जाएगा और ये काम हो जाएगा. इतने टेक स्टार्टअप्स आजकल गिर रहे हैं, आप लोग देख रहे हैं. You can see that there is a general downfall happening in terms of a lot of startups, a lot of initiatives. AI चैट जीपीटी के बारे में कह रहे हैं कि मतलब वो खुद कह रहे हैं 2026 तक हम bankrupt हो जाएंगे, जो हम कह रहे हैं. So please, scientific and technocentric solutions, be very careful around it. Google the word scientism. These are all things we need to understand, that we are not susceptible to physics envy, or the soft sciences need to start aiming, need to stop aping and emulating the hard sciences, because they pose different fragments of the truth. Don't elevate one truth more than the other in the process of just thinking कि ये मेरे career prospects ज़्यादा हैं, या फिर ये prestige ज़्यादा है, या फिर ये ज़्यादातर लोग सोचते हैं तो अब यही होगा. So that's my well, $1, not 2 cents on this particular thing.
Rhetorical 2 cents worth take home. No, it was very well said. I really do appreciate the messages and everything that you've kind of told us today. And maybe in the future we'll have a part 2 and we can further dive deeper into some aspect. Philosophy is something that we've always kind of considered, different philosophical viewpoints and philosophers, and how can you then relate um, uh, those philosophical ways of life to innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship. So linking it back to ICE, and maybe that could be a future session. But we're way past our time.
One last thing, I would really encourage everyone over here to explore upstream medicine and the social context which allows medical outcomes to happen. This is what my second startup is about. It's called social medicine. Please जरूर देखें कि जो preventive cure है उसके ऊपर social context कितना important है, और डॉक्टर्स को आज फील्ड में निकल के खुद देखना कि किस तरह चीजें चल रही हैं, उनको उसमें ट्रेन होना, सोशल साइंटिस्ट के साथ मिलके बात करना, ये चीजें कितनी जरूरी हो गई हैं. बिकॉज इसके बगैर मुझे नहीं लगता. आप सोच लें कि डेवलप्ड नेशंस में अगर कोरोना वायरस ने धज्जियां उड़ा दी थी सबकी, लाइक इटली और इधर जगह पे, ये लोग सबसे ज्यादा प्रिपेयर थे. पाकिस्तान जैसी जगह पे आप, और इंडिया साथ था. What happened in Pakistan? You saw कि मतलब इमरान खान को प्रेज मिला था कि भाई ये क्या किया आपने कोरोना वायरस में. बहुत सिंपल सी बात है, जो एक इंडिविजुअलिस्टिक कल्चर है उधर, वो अपने राइट्स के लिए खड़े होते हैं, कहते हैं हमने वैक्सीनेशन नहीं लगानी, हमने ये चीजें नहीं करनी. Whereas over here people thought कि हम लोग genuinely जनाजे नहीं पढ़ पाएंगे दूसरों के अगर हम लोगों ने नहीं किया. The rural setting I worked in, we did this with the coronavirus. हम लोगों ने पहले emergency response में 2-3 साल रखा था. We established ourselves as healthcare providers, and when corona came, हम लोगों ने मस्जिदों से ऐलान करवाए थे कि आप ना करें. ठीक है. So this is what I'm trying to convey to you, that being part of the field, your science cannot be restricted to the laboratory or the hospital bedroom. It needs to extend beyond to social contexts.
Excellent point. Social determinants of health and social medicine, your startup. So if anybody's interested, anybody online, I don't know if there's online, but people over here, if you're interested, just you can reach out to me and I can connect you to Faizan, or you can stalk him on LinkedIn and then learn more from him. All right. Thank you very much, Faizan,
Thank you,
and
Professor.
have a great evening.
You
And
too.
thank you, everyone. Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Hafiz.
Thank you. Take care.
Yeah, you too.